The envelope was still sealed. I had moved it 4 times in 5 years. From the kitchen drawer to the bedside table. From there to the closet shelf. From the shelf to a cedar box I kept for things I could not look at but could not throw away. And then 2 winters ago, back to the kitchen drawer. Because something in me needed it close. I did not know, even then, what I was really waiting for. Yesterday morning I woke up before the light came through. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, and did not move. My hands were in my lap. The drawer was right there. I had been dreading this morning for months, and also counting toward it the way you count toward something you are afraid of, and cannot stop wanting. I sat there for a long time before I reached for it. What I was afraid of, I think, was not what the letter said. It was that opening it would be the last new thing he ever gave me. And once I read it, that would be finished. Marcus died on a Tuesday morning in February of 2019. Not dramatically. He had been declining for almost 2 years, and by the end the house had already gone quiet in a way that felt permanent before it was. The hospice nurse was there. Our youngest, Renata, had driven up from Colombia the night before and was asleep in the back room when it happened. I was holding his hand. I did not cry right away. I just sat there with a hand that was no longer holding back, and thought about whether I had turned off the porch light, whether there was bread in the freezer. That is grief for me. It does not arrive as weeping. It arrives as groceries. We had been married 31 years. We met in Memphis, married young, moved to Charlotte when the work came north and stayed. Raised 3 children in a brick house on a street with oak trees so old they had started to buckle the sidewalk out front. Marcus taught high school biology for 26 years. He coached track for 14 of those. Every October he made his own hot sauce and labeled the bottles in that precise handwriting of his and gave them out at Christmas. He was a quiet man. Not cold. Just careful with words in a way that made the ones he did use mean something. 3 weeks before he died, he called me into the bedroom. He asked me to open the second drawer of the nightstand. Underneath his reading glasses and a worn Bible and a ticket stub from a Hornets game I had no memory of attending, there was an envelope. Plain white. My name on the front. He said, "Do not open that until 5 years have passed." I said, "Marcus, what is in it?" He said, "Things I want you to know when you are ready to know them." I said, "Why 5 years?" He said, "Because right now you are going to need to be angry, and you are going to need to grieve, and neither of those things leaves room for what I wrote. Give it time. Give yourself time." I wanted to push. I always pushed. 31 years and I was still the one who wanted to open every door before it finished swinging. But something in his voice that afternoon was different. He was not afraid. He was asking because he loved me. I could feel the difference even if I cannot fully explain it now. I took the envelope, put it in the drawer, said nothing else. He was gone 17 days later. The first year, grief filled everything. There is no other way to say it. It takes up all the space. Renata came and stayed 3 weeks. My son David called every Sunday from Atlanta, almost without fail. My oldest, Patricia, was in and out. That was its own complicated thing. But it is not what today is about. I kept the house. People assumed I would sell, move closer to one of the children. But I had been in that house 22 years, and I was not ready to let it tell me what to do. By the second year the letter would surface. Not obsessively. But it was there. Driving to the store. Lying awake at 3 in the morning. Whenever I passed the nightstand, which I had kept exactly as he left it, for reasons I did not examine too closely, I started to build theories. I told myself he was going to apologize for something old and small. Some unkindness from the early years. Some night he worked too late or some argument that ended with one of us just going quiet. Marcus was the kind of man who carried things a long time, and then set them down with intention. It would be something like that. That was what I kept telling myself. By the third year I had mostly stopped guessing. But there was a night, late in the second year, when I almost broke the promise. I was sitting at this same kitchen table past midnight, and I had the envelope in my hands, just holding it. The paper had gone soft at the corners from being moved so many times. I sat there and I thought, he is gone. He cannot know. And whatever is in here, I need it now. I set it back down. I do not fully know why. Something in me understood that opening it too soon would be taking something from myself. I put it back in the drawer and I did not pick it up again for a long time. The third year was also the year I found the door. I was in the basement that March, maybe early April. Moving boxes I had not touched since Marcus got sick. The house was not large. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen that opened onto a back porch, a basement for storage and laundry. Brick construction, built in the late 70s. In the far corner, behind the old chest freezer, I noticed a section of wall paneling that did not sit flush. I had not seen it in 24 years of living in that house. The freezer had always been there, up against that wall. No reason to ever move it. I pulled the freezer out slowly, careful of my back. The floor was cold through my socks. The basement smelled of dust and old cardboard, and something underneath that I could not name. There was a door. My first thought was that I had misread the wall. My second thought, coming right behind it, was something darker. Hidden. For a moment my heart did something I did not like. A quick cold clutch before reason could catch up. In 24 years I had never seen this. And Marcus had never mentioned it. I stood there. I did not move for longer than I would like to admit. Then I opened the latch. Inside was a room. Small. 8 feet by 10 maybe. Low ceiling. The air smelled of cedar and dry, undisturbed time. There was a pull cord for a single bulb, and when I pulled it the light came on, which surprised me. A folding table along one wall. A wooden chair. A shelf. And on the table, something I recognized even though I had not seen it in years. His old field recorder. The one he carried when he went birdwatching. Small, battered, olive green. Rubber strap he had replaced twice. He had stopped taking it out maybe 4 years before he died, and I had assumed it was lost. It was sitting on the table facing the chair, as though it had been placed there with care. Next to it, a small notebook. His handwriting on the cover. 3 words. For when you find it. I did not go in that day. I closed the door, pushed the freezer back, walked upstairs. Sat at the kitchen table. Poured myself a glass of water, and held it without drinking it. I thought about who I had been married to. No. Let me be more honest than that. I thought about what I had missed. For 31 years I had been certain I understood the shape of this man. And it turned out the shape had a corner I had never turned. There was a place in this house, in our house, where he went that I did not know about. The first thing I felt was not hurt. It was fear. Not fear of what he had done, but fear of what I might find out he had done. I will say that plainly. My mind went somewhere it had no evidence to go, and I had to sit there and wait for the fear to settle. It took longer than a few days. Here is what I recognized slowly, sitting with all of it. I had given him his privacy because it felt like respect. But maybe I had given it too easily. Maybe there had been a point, somewhere in the middle of our life together, where I stopped asking because it felt easier than whatever the answers might be. That is the part that belongs to me. Not blame. Just my own portion of the distance. I went back down after about a week. Maybe less. It felt like longer. I pulled the chair out and sat. Opened the notebook first. The first page said, I am not a man who explains himself easily. But I kept this space because I needed somewhere the noise of the world could not follow. I am sorry I never showed it to you. I did not know how to explain it without sounding like I was pulling away. I was not pulling away. I was filling up so that I had something to bring back. The pages after that were bird notes. Dates, locations, species, small sketches in the margins. 20 years of quiet attention and handwriting so careful it looked like he was afraid the words might startle something. He noted weather and light, and the exact time a particular warbler appeared at a certain tree. These were not casual observations. They were the record of a devotion. Near the back, the nature notes gave way to something else. Just thoughts. Fragments. About teaching. About watching a student suddenly understand something difficult. About faith. About the strange guilt of a man who loved his family, and also needed a silence he could only find alone. He wrote once, "I wonder if she ever needed this kind of room and never made one. I wonder if I took up so much quiet that there was none left for her. That is something I carry." I read that sentence and I sat very still. No. That is not quite right. I read it and I felt something shift. Not warmly. First I felt something that was close to anger. He had been wondering about me this whole time, writing about what I might need, and he had still never said a word. There is a kind of tenderness that stays private so long it starts to feel like withholding. I thought, "Marcus, you could have just asked me." Then I picked up the recorder. The battery was dead. Of course it was. I went upstairs, found batteries that fit, came back down, sat in the chair again. The basement was quiet. Just the sound of the house settling, the faint smell of cedar. I held the recorder for a little while before I pressed play. I want to be honest about that too. I was afraid of what his voice would do to me after 2 years of silence. I pressed play. He was recording birds. You could hear them clearly. He narrated quietly, the way he did everything, in a low voice that barely disturbed the air. Red-tailed hawk circling northeast. Light from the east, morning, maybe 8 o'clock. There is a moment when it tilts and you can see the underside of the wing, and it looks almost like it is not real. I sat and I listened. 6 recordings. Some only a few minutes. One nearly 40. In the long one he moved from birds into something more personal. He talked about his father, who died years before I met him. He talked about the summer he almost left teaching. He talked about the night David was born, how he had driven home from the hospital alone in the dark, because I was still in recovery, and the nurses had finally made him go rest. How he had pulled into the driveway and sat in the car, and felt something he said he had no word for. Not joy exactly. Something larger and more frightening. The knowledge that his life had a weight now it had not had before. He said, "I never told her this. I should have told her this." Then he was quiet for a moment. Then he went back to the birds. Yesterday morning I opened the letter. I had been sitting with the kitchen dark, just the early gray coming through the window. The envelope had gone soft at the corners from years of being moved, and set down and moved again. I broke the seal with my thumbnail the way you open any ordinary envelope, which is not how it felt. He told me about the room. He told me it had existed since the 2nd year of our marriage, when he had discovered the door while helping replace the water heater, and had decided, for reasons he was only beginning to understand himself, to keep it to himself. He wrote that he had never used it for anything he was ashamed of. He used it to think, to rest, to be only himself for an hour or two, when the weight of being everything to everyone became more than he could carry quietly. He said he was sorry he had not told me. He said he thought, for a long time, that I would not understand. Then he wrote that he had been wrong about that I would have understood. And the real reason he never told me was that he was afraid of needing something I could not give, and that fear had felt too large to speak. He wrote, "You have always been stronger than me at saying the hard thing." I admired that. It also made me hide. That is my truth, and it is not a blame on you. It is just the shape of me. I put the letter down. I did not cry right away. I sat there with it folded in my hands, and I thought about how he had known, even in those last weeks when he was very sick and had little energy left for anything, that what he was writing might land somewhere between relief and grief. He had known and he had written it anyway. And he had asked me to wait because he knew I would need the time to become someone who could receive it. I was not sure, sitting there, that I had become that person. I was not sure the anger was entirely gone. But I read it again. And then I looked out the window. He said he hoped 5 years had been enough time. He hoped I had found a way to be a little lighter. He hoped the trees out front were still there. He knew I would be sitting at that table looking at those trees. That is what finally made me cry. Not the room. Not the recordings. Not the careful words he had chosen in the last weeks of his life. It was that small thing. That he could still see me, from wherever he had gone, sitting in this kitchen looking at those trees. He had written it in as a way of saying, I know you. I always knew you. Even the parts one could not reach. I sat there until the light came all the way through. The letter was 3 pages. I read it twice more. Then I folded it along its original creases, and held it in both hands for a while. I am not sure I have made my peace with all of it. There is still something I sit with, a question I cannot quite close. About whether a person can love you fully and still hold a part of themselves entirely away. I do not know the answer. I am not sure there is one. What I know is that he tried to give me what he could, in the way that he knew how, and that some of it arrived 31 years late, and through a sealed envelope, and I am grateful for it anyway. The trees out front are still there. Still old. Still buckling the sidewalk in the same slow way they have been doing for as long as I can remember. He knew I would look at them. That is enough. For now, that is enough.